Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the California Library Association Ursula Meyer Training Library Advocacy Training Project, where we do monthly series, monthly sessions. The slide you were seeing introduces the series, and this is up there for people watching the archive version. So I'm going to stop talking for about 30 seconds. As I've said to other people on the call, this will be about the only 30 seconds of silence you get for the next 90 minutes. So take this in, I'll take the slide down, and then we're going to hop right into it. Hey, for the speed readers among you, you've seen it. There we are. You know that we have these things archived on our YouTube channel that we just updated yesterday. So we hope you go back and look at those and share those out, please. Our point here with the bequest that we have for this particular series is to make it accessible primarily to our California audience, but it's on the internet. It's open to anybody out there in library land who can benefit from it, and we're happy to have you there. If you like what you see and you want to donate to keep the series going, you see the link down at the bottom of the slide there. We're always happy to have additional donations. And with that said, end of slide, Amanda and I are going to jump into things. We both kind of believe that we don't need long introductions to something like this. We're going to jump right in. We're going to do something a little different today. Amanda's book, That Librarian, talks about the fight against book banning in America, which of course is the underpinning for today's session. And we decided if we were going to set the context here, the best way to set the context is to actually take the first page of the book and immerse you in this story immediately. Chapter 1, Liars and Buzzards and Trolls, Oh My, starts off with a death threat that Amanda receives on August 14th, 2022. Subject line is Alphabet Agenda. We've agreed, I'm going to read that email that went to her, and then she's going to read the first paragraph of the book that gives you the response, and we're going to dive into this whole thing of how you deal with harassment and controversy. So here's the lovely email. Amanda, you're indoctrinating our children with perversion plus pedophilia grooming. Your evil agenda is getting print plus national coverage. Congrats. Nice. Continue with your LGBT agenda on our children because we're going to put your fat, evil, commie, pedo as AZZ in the dirt very soon, bitch. You can't hide. We know where you work plus live. You have a large target on your back. Click, click. See you soon. That's the email. Here's Amanda's response from the book.
When I opened this email on August 14th, 2022, my hand started to shake and I immediately began gasping for breath. The absurdness of it also crossed my mind, and I had the fleeting thought that my preteen students could write better emails than this. But there is nothing funny about receiving a threat on your life. I began again to wonder what possessed someone to send another human being such an email. Sadly, I'd been spending a large portion of the previous weeks pondering why random strangers go online to put down, troll, threaten, and defame people who they've never met. Do they wake up and think to themselves, I wonder who I can ruin today to make myself feel better, to fill the hole in my life? I believe that anyone who does this kind of thing suffers from some type of trauma or that something essential is missing from their lives.
Thank you, Amanda. So that's our first ever live author reading in an Ursula Meyer series, which is going on for 4 years now. But more importantly, it tells you viscerally right up front what Amanda faced and how surprised she was. And you can imagine how devastated she was. So let's start it off in the theme of saying, God forbid, what if this happens to you? Amanda, how did you deal with it in those first few months? The traumas you felt, the community you turned to, and let's do this with an eye towards saying to people, if you face this, here's what one of our peers did to get past it.
Well, it took me by surprise. That was an anonymous email. I mean, I know who wrote it now, but it was an anonymous email, and honestly, that wasn't as hurtful as the things coming from people I know my whole life that were things that people I've grown up with. My own kindergarten teacher, a lady who taught me kindergarten, wrote that I was a groomer online. So, it was. I went through a lot of emotions. The first few days, I cried. I hid in my bedroom and I cried so much that my eyes swelled shut and I couldn't breathe. Eventually, over the course of a few months, I started losing chunks of hair. I lost 50 pounds from not being able to eat. I was having debilitating and panic attacks because things like this were being said to me constantly. It was like an onslaught on every social media platform. And sometimes people say, oh, well, just turn off, don't answer your emails or turn off social media. People were saying this to me in public as well in my very small town. Um, so what I did personally, and I don't know that it's the best, it's just what I did and it worked for me. The first thing I did was I filed a police report. Um, and if you ever get an email like this, you don't want to forward it because it can mess up the email, the code in the email header. And so I worked with someone who helped me trace the email to who it was. And I looked up this person and I presented the police department with all the information. I'm like, here you go. Here's the person on a silver platter that did this. Um, but you also have to have the expectation that they're not going to do anything about it. Um, and there's a lot of reasons why I think the people in my town didn't do anything about it, the sheriff's department. But you need to document it. So you need to document with a police report. If it's anything on the internet, you also need to go. The FBI has cyber crimes unit, and you need to lodge complaints with them as well. And you want to make sure you print it, you save it, preserve it for in case you need it in the future for lawsuits or whatever. Um, you also want to make sure you, as librarian, I wanted everyone that I worked for to know because it talks about it, they know where I work. So I made sure to let everybody from, I'm a school librarian, so everyone from the secretary who answers our phones to the principal, all the way up to the superintendent of schools, to see this email and know what had happened to me so that everyone's prepared so that we can come up with a statement to say if anyone from outside the school system called and asked questions. But documenting is key. That's what you want to do first and foremost. Um, Other than that, when you get something like that, there's pretty much nothing you can do besides lodge a police report and hope that they do something about it as far as trying to get back at them legally. But there are some things you can do emotionally. There are ways to protect yourself on social media. Um, and Paul, I'm gonna cough. I apologize. You do want to make sure though that you're keeping your social you're scrubbing your social media so that people can't have access to your friends and family through your social media links, because that's what they started doing to me. They started reaching out to my parents and my siblings and my friends and my people at coworkers. So you want to lock down social media, and there's very easy ways to do that. And I always point people to the PEN America field guide for harassment. There's one for educators and librarians, and it will help you shore up your social media accounts.
There's so much to address here. Let's get to the thing that got it started so that people, if they're asking, well, what did you do to get people out there? Remember, folks, Amanda's a school librarian and she's an educator. She went to a public library hearing. It wasn't even work related. She went because she wanted to speak out in favor of keeping open access to books out there. Amanda, describe briefly the meeting you went to, what you said, and then the response you got afterwards.
Yeah, so I've lived in this small town in Louisiana my entire life. Um, I'm 47, so 47-year resident. At the time I was 44. Um, I've lived and worked here my entire life, and I grew up in the public library. My mom, retired kindergarten teacher, would take us every week. And so when I saw an extremist group that had been targeting other parishes, because we're parishes, not counties in Louisiana, targeting other parishes and their library systems, and I saw that same extremist group start targeting our library system, I knew I had to go and speak. And what I said was it's a speech. It wasn't anything remarkable. It was something that any librarian would say. I just reiterated 3 times that we already have policies and procedures in place for people to challenge books. There's a whole process. There's a collection development policy. We need to trust our librarians. I talked about censorship and how it heavily targets historically marginalized groups. I talked about the repercussions of that on historically marginalized groups, talked about the Trevor Project. I quoted the American Library Association. I didn't talk about any particular books. That was just a blanket speech. That's all I said. In fact, you can find my entire speech in the back of my book, and it's on my website. You can see it's nothing controversial. However, 4 days after I spoke, and I'll just say this, at that meeting, probably 30 other residents of our community spoke and said the same thing I did. In fact, they were a lot more forceful. And, I don't know, they singled me out for what I said, but um, they twisted what I said and they posted online. that in my speech, I talked about certain books that I didn't talk about that weren't mentioned at the meeting. Um, and they said that I advocate the teaching of anal sex to 11-year-olds and that I promote pornography and erotica to 6-year-olds, both of which are crimes and are illegal and that I have not done. And it went on, it didn't stop there. They just, for weeks, tagging me on every single imaginable social media platform, tagging family members and friends, tagging my work. At the time, I was the president of the Louisiana Association of School Librarians. They were going on our association page. Um, it was a nightmare. People were calling me a groomer and a pedophile and just horrible things. Some people demanded I be fired from my job. Some people said I should be slapped and purged. And it was a horrible time. It was not a fun time. It's still happening. It's been 3 years. It's still happening. But now I'm just used to it, which is sad. It's a sad state where you just get used to being, you know. But I have learned to protect myself a little better since then.
With that in mind, let's turn back to the people who are with us on this call. Those of you who have joined us today, question for you: what controversy or harassment have you faced as a result of your work as an advocate on behalf of libraries and the communities you serve? Let's get those stories out and let's see if we can share some common responses to that leave everybody in a position to do better after they leave the call today. So again, those of you on the call, what have you faced in this area?
And while we're waiting on people to say anything, I was very naive and I thought when all this happened to me that it's because of where I live and that because I live in a very ultra far right area. I assumed this was a red state problem or a conservative, ultra conservative, or a Southern problem. Over the past 2 or 3 years, I've traveled to over 30 states, and it's an everywhere problem. Um, Unfortunately, I've met librarians from California, New York City, Chicago, that have had similar problems. These fights are so local, they're so local, but they can happen anywhere. So we can't get too comfortable, and we have to learn how to be proactive so that we're not reactive. We want to play offense, not defense.
We've got a note in the channel throughout the session today. Read these in for people who are watching the archive version and may not be able to see the chat. So Nicholas says, like Amanda, many staff members, especially children's staff, have been accused of grooming and teaching sex to children. Unfortunately, because this was coming from local elected officials, a lot of staff members left the library. Nicholas, what steps are you and your peers taking to support your peers who are facing this? And while we're waiting for Nicholas's response, Amanda, you talked quite a bit right now. So Nicholas is saying right now it's rebuilding the staff since so many left. In retrospect, Nicholas, do you see anything you could have done that could have held on to some of the staff members, or was it just so overwhelming there was no way to keep them there? So the answer what we're getting from Nicholas is opening communication, openly communicating between management and staff. Amanda, this is something that you and I haven't really talked about. When things started to hit the fan for you, what sort of communications were going on at your school and then within your community to sort of tamp this down to the best of your ability?
So before I delve into that, I want to point out that what Nicholas said about, unfortunately, this is coming from local elected officials. And that ties in with the state of the American Library Association State of Libraries report that just came out recently that said that 72% of all of our challenges and censorship attempts are coming from pressure groups and government entities. 72%. So that is something that is very different from what we've seen historically with because censorship and book banning, it's all cyclical. You have the Harry Potter scare in the early 2000s, and you have Judy Blume has talked about her books in the 80s, and this does come from elected officials. They're using the library as pawns for political gain. Um, so my situation is a little unique in that I spoke out at the public library, but they came after me for the school. Early on, I was very unsupported publicly. I'm still unsupported publicly. But I kind of felt left thrown to the wolves, if I'm being honest, at school. I mean, there was some quiet support behind the scenes, but nobody was making any statements to say, "Oh, Amanda would never do this." And um, as someone who I thought I was okay, established a member of my community. I've won over $100,000 in grants for my school. I've won multiple national awards. I thought, my record speaks for itself, but when your own work and your school system don't support you publicly, it's a little rough. Um, what we learned to do locally, because we do have a lot of politicians that will say, oh, they're teaching this and they're teaching that. And when your public officials won't come out and, or when your bosses and won't come out and attack you, I mean, protect you. What we did was I founded a library alliance in my community. And that's what I think a lot of people need to do. And some people will say, oh, well, I already have a group. We have a friends group. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a friends group. I'm talking about an alliance, a group that's ready to jump in and stir things up and set the tone and put the truth out there and do some good trouble. And a lot of that work can be done anonymously. Um, so I founded the Livingston Parish Library Alliance. And so what we did to combat these things where they're saying, oh, the library workers are doing this, that, and the other. Well, anytime a local elected official would say, oh, they're doing this, we would show a snippet of the video where they said it or the email or whatever, and then we would post the truth. That is not true. XYZ. So if they say they like to post a book out of context and say this is in the children's section, we would post that book and say, actually, that's in the teen nonfiction section. And then we would use something like Unite Against Book Bans book resumes or professional reviews that we research ourselves and say, here's the truth of the matter. This book is about XYZ. It's found in the teen nonfiction section. And let me tell you why it's there. And we would bring in statistics like a lot of times they like to bring in books on sexual reproduction. We would say, well, you can get married at 16 in Louisiana. So what you're saying is that you can't have books about reproduction in the teen nonfiction section? That doesn't make sense. We brought up we have one of the highest rates of foster care in our parish. And we would say this is coming from a lot of pregnancies that were unexpected pregnancies, and they need the literature in the book. So we did truth campaigns through an anonymous I mean, they all knew it was me that created it, the alliance, so they couldn't approve it. And so you need somebody out there to cause good trouble and shake things up, but also push out the truth of what's happening. Call them out on it. I mean, we've sent open letters to legislators that say, you said this, and this is the truth, and when are you going to apologize and set the record straight? And we call them out on it.
Well, in a session like this, we're always trying to make sure that you walk away with some action items. And rather than just say, here's a bunch of slides with bullet points, I'm going to routinely point out stuff like what Amanda just said. If you see a colleague who is being attacked, to the best of your ability, support them. Amanda makes that clear in her book, how much it meant to her to have people reach out when initially a lot of people she knew wouldn't even talk to her and they were helping to spread the rumors. We've got these wonderful comments from Nicholas that I'm going to continue to read in here from his experience. Starts with him saying, our previous management team told us nothing about what was happening. So folks, make sure your management team is functioning at that level. Let them know you're their partners. You need to be knowing this. Continuing what Nicholas says, this attack came out of nowhere to staff, but management had been aware of what was coming for a while. Also, many of our elected officials belong to the same church, which is actually politically active. Going back to the original question again from Nicholas, giving staff a standardized script on how to respond to FAQs has been helpful. So if you don't have that in place and you're facing this, think about that. Go online and see what other libraries are doing. Make contact here in this meeting through the chat so that you can get those links. And Nicholas, if you have anything that's public, please go ahead and put that in the chat so other people can see that. He also adds here, in the past, a lot of staff felt unprepared to respond to personal attacks and were scared to respond on the spot. Again, Amanda's book deals with that covered start to finish on things you can do. Nancy's asking a question here. Does the school library have a published collection development policy approved by the school board that you could refer back to, Amanda?
So they did not. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I brought this to their attention and they were like, oh, well, you can write one. So
Nice.
yeah, so even though they make 40, 50,000 more of me at the central office. I was like, okay, I will write one. So I wrote one, and I got the help of elementary, middle school, and high school librarians in my district. And we wrote an 84-page document that they then told us we didn't need anymore. But what I did was I actually just printed it and I used that's what I use because we don't have one. Um, we have a reconsideration policy standardized across the district, but not a collection development policy. Sometimes they'll refer back to our state standards. It doesn't matter though, because these texts came on uh, the texts in my community were not on our school library. It was on our public library, and our public library had a very well-established collection development policy. What people need to understand is, yes, you should have, absolutely, you should have your collection development policies, your reconsideration policies, but it doesn't matter to these people. Like they're going to try to circumvent them. So it doesn't matter because they're going to file 100, 200 challenges at the same time, having not read the book, even though the policy says to read it. They're going to say, that even though there's a collection development policy and there's a whole process, they're going to try to make new policies that say that they need to have review teams. And in our case in Louisiana, we've seen them try to put pastors and unqualified people on review teams. They're going to try to circumvent it anyway. So yes, you should have your policies, but they're going to try to circumvent it anyway.
And Nicholas added a couple more things here. Reconsideration forms, having staff knowing about this policy has also been helpful. It diffuses a heated argument against staff and shifts the attention away from desk staff to managers. Again, we all want to be in this together, folks. I think from what I've seen in advocacy over the few years I've been involved through the California Library Association, one of the best things we have is the knowledge that we're not alone. And it's going to be natural for me as somebody working as a contractor with the California Library Association to say, start with us if you're here in California. If you're under attack, we have a legislation and advocacy committee that needs to know about these issues. They can bring that to the state legislature if legislation is a requirement. But more importantly, the informal basis, as Carol, who's on the call here, can tell you, we talk to each other all the time. And when something comes up, there is strength in numbers and there is comfort in knowing that you're not alone. And it wasn't something that you set out to do. And you can't make the point strongly enough. Amanda didn't go out to start trying to be a great advocate or somebody that was going to lead a bandwagon across the entire country. She went to a public meeting to speak out on something that was important to her. And we all know what happened as a result of that. Carol, you want to add anything to what I've just been saying?
Just really quick, this is a great conversation, and I appreciate what everybody is saying. I was thinking about we changed our our reconsideration policy to say that if a person who is, you have to be a library card holder and be a resident to be able to submit a reconsideration request. And secondarily, we included if the book has been reconsidered already once this year, it's not going to be reconsidered for another 2 years. So trying to address what you're talking about, Amanda, where you get 500 people submitting something and maybe they're not even the residents. It's just very, very tough. I was just curious, Amanda, when you were talking earlier about the truth campaigns, how were you able to, I don't know, push that out to make sure it was getting in front of the people that you wanted? Like, did you have a specific, besides clarifying the truth, it seems to me that perhaps one of your other objectives was to get people behind you, right? And so I was wondering if you had like a strategy around that you could maybe share.
Yes, so you want to look where your stakeholders are at. In our community, they're on Facebook. They spend way too much time on Facebook, in my opinion. And so we use the same sites that they were using to stir up the controversy. So we created a social media page called the Livingston Parish Library Alliance. And if you can Google Livingston Parish Library Alliance and see our website, and we have our truth campaign, so you can kind of see some of our previous posts and how we link it to videos and screenshots and whatever. But we created a social media page for our alliance, And we would post the truth, but then what we would do little campaigns like, everybody on here, make it your mission today to invite 5 people to this page. But then we would take those campaigns that we were running and we would drop it into the same local Facebook groups that were stirring up the controversy and get them talking. And so then they would all run over to our page to sign up to follow. Even the bad actors would sign up to follow because they wanted to see what we were saying. And we had ugly comments and stuff on our alliance page, but it got everybody to start following us. So we would just take our campaigns and link it and drop it in those Facebook, those controversial. Ours are called the Rants or Raves page. Where really, I don't know why they're called a rave page because they don't rave about anything. It's rant. But we would drop them in all the local pages to get people to start talking.
I was
I'll
thinking,
also say I'm sorry. Well, I was also say we also made videos and graphics to go along with that we would post in there. And we would build up to truth campaigns. Like we'd put little snippet teaser videos like, coming soon, we're going to reveal all. And so everybody was like all anticipating. And we used video tools as well to get people's attention.
I was thinking about how uh, whether you were doing that on off work time, so that there was not a any kind of conflict.
Oh yes, which they did a big expose on me that said I was doing it during work hours, but the truth is there's a bunch of us in our alliance, and 4 people have access to our social media account and 4 people have access to our emails. So they can't prove I'm doing anything during work time, but I'm not. I'm not doing it at work time, but that is a good point. You want to make sure that when you're doing this work, you're doing it from personal computers, off of work Wi-Fi. Even if you're on a break you don't want to use your work's Wi-Fi. You don't want to anything that can tie it back to libraries or where you work. You want to do it on your personal devices on your own time. That is very important because just as an example, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, 19 of us filed open meetings violations complaints against the extremist on our library board of control. 19 of us. And we all sent them into our attorney general and she ruled on our behalf. Well, they got mad. The book banners got mad about that. So they did a Freedom of Information Act to see, and they saw that the open meetings violation was sent in during what would be my work hours. So they did this big expose about how I was doing this during work hours. I'm not the only one that can send emails from our account. So, they just keep putting lies out there. But you do have to be cognizant that they are going to use that against you. So be very careful about when and how and where you send these things and posts.
Man, one other thing I want to hit before we start really getting into the whole idea of here's steps out of the book that people can take. The lawsuits that you filed have been an interesting and convoluted story. I'm going to put a link into chat right now for everybody to see. This is a recording of an interview that a few of us did with Amanda a few months ago. We're not going to cover the same material, which is why I'm putting the link in here. Amanda Jones, Fighting Book Bans, episode 9 of San Jose State University's iSchool podcast, Information Gone Wild, where we talked extensively about what every library did, what American Library Association has done. But let's focus for a minute on, if it gets bad, how does somebody approach a decision as to what kind of suit to file and what do they face?
So there comes a time when you have to decide, how far are you going to take it and how are you going to fight back? And I knew immediately, there were 2 particular men in my case, 2 particular men that were saying these outrageous things about me. And they were not true, and they were accusing me of crimes. And I decided very early on I wasn't going to take it. So all of my court cases that I am involved in, that I have started, they're not against me, I filed them, are defamation lawsuits. What you have to understand is that when you're called a groomer and a pedophile, or in this case, these men said that I was advocating the teaching of anal sex to 11-year-olds and giving pornography and erotica to 6-year-olds, and that is not true. So I filed defamation lawsuits. What you have to understand is that lawsuits are very, very costly and time consuming. I'm still fighting for the right to have a trial, and it's 3 years in, and I've spent about $60,000 personally. Now, by the end of it, it's going to go on for several more years and several more tens of thousands of dollars. And ultimately, in a defamation lawsuit, You have to think long and hard about this because in my case, it's a defamation lawsuit, and I'm the one funding it through the generosity of a GoFundMe that people are helping me with. Um, but ultimately, if I lose, I have to pay their court costs as well. So there's the ultimate, if you lose, you have to pay the people who defamed you. Um, there's also when you choose to speak out about things, you can be labeled a public figure. So I was labeled a public figure, even though I was just a school librarian in a small town. I was labeled a public figure, and when you're labeled a public figure, there's a fourth facet of defamation called malice. So you have to make sure when you file something like this, you have proof of malice. I have proof of malice. I'm just waiting for a trial. Um, there are several court cases like mine. There's one, Roxana Caivano in New Jersey is a school librarian who has filed defamation lawsuits similar to mine. And Christine Beechler in Michigan just also filed a defamation lawsuit against Moms for Liberty in Michigan for the same things. The other court cases that we're seeing across the country tend to be like about censorship and book banning in schools and public libraries. Those are funded by, you've seen Penguin Random House jump in. American Library Association has written some amicus briefs. There's a lot of different organizations out there that are helping with that. And those lawsuits are also costly, but they're being done by professional organizations. So if you are a personal, you got to be very careful because it's very costly. I know that there are 7 citizens in Llano, Texas that filed, it's Little versus Llano, a lawsuit against the public library, and they have been helped out exponentially by different nonprofits. But it's very costly, it's very time consuming. And when you're in a lawsuit, they have access to everything in your phone and your computers and everything. And so they're going to try to use anything and everything against you to attack you personally. So be very careful about that.
What other questions do you have for Amanda before we move into the second part of our planned program for you today? Anybody? As you're watching the archive version, I'm just letting it sit for a little bit so you have not lost silence. Carol, do you want to add something?
I was just wondering if we could put her GoFundMe in the chat, if that was possible.
I don't have any problem with that. Amanda, if you care to put that link in, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I'm gonna put my website in. It's librarianjones.com, and there's a link on there to speaking out. And under there, it has links to the different court cases. I am in 2 federal and 1 local state lawsuit, all 3 of which are defamation lawsuits. Um, and the reason why I chose to file is because I had spoken with my attorney, and there were not at the time any similar cases. And so the reason why I am going to see this finished to the end is to hopefully set a precedent so that other librarians can, hopefully I win, and that the other librarians can use my court decisions as precedent so that it will stop people from saying these things, or at least think twice. And if they continue after they've thought twice and they still post awful things about you, you have court precedent to follow up on and say, well, according to this court case, blah, 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 So that's why I filed, is to try to help everyone in the future, not just myself.
You made it pretty clear here that it can be an expensive and time-consuming endeavor to pursue one of these. I think it'd be instructive if you give people a brief summary of what it took actually to even get a court to agree to hear the case, because you described that process in the book and then in follow-up articles. You've described the process of filing and then being told, no, you can't file, no, we're not going to hear your case. Could you summarize that for us so people know what they're getting themselves into and have the encouragement from you to stick it out?
So when I started this, I had never been inside of a courtroom, a police station. I didn't know anything. I didn't know any attorneys. I didn't know anything about anything. Um, and I had an attorney, my original attorney, and I don't want to say anything ill. This was not her wheelhouse. And she took my case anyway, and I didn't know any better. And um, they bested us at the first court hearing. Their attorneys were more well versed in the law, and the judge, it was a local elected official judge, and she ultimately dismissed the case and said, well, it's just their opinion that I give pornography to 6-year-olds, and it's their opinion, and she wouldn't even listen. So what I learned from that is now I have a different attorney, and the attorney that I have now is an expert at this type of law. So I would say that before you do anything, research your attorneys. And I have someone who like, my attorney is fabulous now. Um, but you need to research the repercussions and the types of lawyers and the things that, because I was so naive. I have a very good attorney now. But yeah, I asked for a restraining order. These men were like, it was constant. And I asked for a restraining order because my life was being threatened. I was not given a restraining order. Then they started mocking me for asking for a restraining order. Um, they started saying I want to get rich off of them. I'm actually just asking for $1 and an apology, ultimately. That's all I'm asking for in my court case. I made that very clear from the get-go. Um, it's, but there's a lot of nuance to court cases and things. Just make sure you have an excellent attorney and that you get the opinions. My attorney gets the opinions of other attorneys before she files things. And it's a process though. And I will say that so far I've had 3 losses and 1 win in my local case. And for all 3 losses at the local level, I pretty much knew that it was going to the way it was going to go. That's what you get when you're in Louisiana and your judge is a local elected official, and all of your other local elected officials are against you and saying these horrible things about you. But my point was to keep going at it so that it would get out of my community into the First Circuit and the Louisiana Supreme Court. And once it did, they ruled in my favor. So you have to, but it's tough to weather that storm. I went into the court naively the first time thinking the truth is going to prevail and good will conquer evil, and then they won and it was devastating. And these people that I'm suing brought their church because somehow it's acceptable for men to target women and their church will come support them. The whole congregation is crying and praise Jesus, and that's hard when you have to sit there and listen to all of that, knowing that you didn't do anything and these men are being horrible to you and accusing you of crimes, and then they win in court. It's horrible. And then they get online and they crow about it for weeks and weeks. And so it's been very hard. But the tide has shifted, and the reason why I filed was to help other people, not just myself. And I feel that even if ultimately I do lose in court, which I don't think I am, but even if I do, at least I tried, and that's the kind of person I am. I have to give it my all. So at least I can say I tried.
So giving your all, being able to say you tried. 2 or 3 tips to people if they get to this point that will help them get past the terrible moments of doubt and frustration.
Well, if you're being targeted, I would go, there's comfort, and it sounds horrible, but there's comfort in knowing that it is happening to a lot of people and not just you. I say that, and it's horrible that it's happening to a lot of other people, but I was reading other stories and I take comfort in, okay, well, like, I'm not the only one. I can draw strength from other people that are going through this as well. So I would look up other people, contact them, or I would read their stories, and I would see that, you know, it's not just me. So I'm sitting here with this woe is me, but I realize it's happening to a lot of people. Another thing to remember is that I look at this from a privileged perspective. I'm a white, straight, cisgender woman, and I look at it as this will be my life for a few years, but the stories and the characters and the people that I'm trying to protect, this is their life forever. And so that is helpful. But something else I think about is that I want to be on the right side of history. I want to set a good example for my own child and my students. But yeah, you want to make sure that you are gathering your allies and building a coalition. Coalition building is important. I have not been alone. I have never been alone. I have had the help of every library and the American Library Association and the National Coalition Against Censorship. And now we need diverse books, and Authors Against Book Bans and Unite Against Book Bans. And you reach out and you make those contacts and you build your coalition. You build a coalition within your own community of library lovers and other people, and those other people will give you strength and you will give them strength in this fight. And you also get resources from outside entities on what to do. Do not try to do this alone. I have a Google Doc with all of my allies. And you also, anytime you get letters of support, take those out and reread them every so often. I print all of mine. I'm now on my second big binder. And I just take them out and I reread them and I remember what I'm fighting for and why I'm fighting for it, and that I have a lot of people on my side, even though it's lonely within my own community. People in my own community don't support me, but people outside my community do.
Yeah, you've been actually, as you said, doing a lot of traveling. You're about to take a trip to Paris to speak to a group there. How has that helped you?
So speaking out is actually one way of fighting back that I think is the most helpful. Um, you know, and when I say speaking out, you have to be very careful in how you do it. You don't want to go back and forth with people online. I talked about earlier how you want to use truth campaigns and you want to post those things, but we don't go back and forth with people online. Excuse me. We post the truth. It is what it is. And I don't argue with people online. You have to just cut it off. But, speaking out is a form of protection because at this point, they try to get me fired at my job as a school librarian all the time, even though I'm doing this work outside of work hours for the public library. They're trying to get me fired all the time, but because I am so outspoken about it and because there is a spotlight on me, um, it's a form of safety. Because my school district, I mean, if they fired me for speaking out on my own time about using my First Amendment rights to speak out and protect the library, it'd be a very bad look for them to fire me for that. First of all, it's illegal. But they know that I would have public support. The more you speak out, the more protection you have. You want to, I've never turned down an interview. Um, and that does mean I do a lot of interviews every day and I'm very tired all the time, but there's protection in speaking out. And also, if I was silent, my silence would be my compliance to this issue. And I will not be complicit in this book banning and this attack on me and libraries and books and stories. And I just will not be complicit. So I refuse to be silent.
Adding to what Amanda said about speaking out there, for those of you that say, oh, I could never do that, or I don't want to be the one to do it, a lot of advocates who face what Amanda's faced talk about having other people speak for them also, which takes a burden off you. It reminds you have a good crowd of support, and it also means that they're out there handling some of that stuff so you don't have to be the one to respond to it all the time. So keep in mind that is an option too, that it doesn't have to be you using your voice. Let's switch tracks here a little bit and read a comment from Nancy, and I've asked her to follow up with some comments online. Her comment in the chat was, "Thank you, Amanda, for being an advocate for freedom to read. We appreciate you. However, I think it's important to distinguish between what Amanda did in her personal capacity versus what other library workers are experiencing in their course of employment." I've asked Nancy to come on unmute herself and talk a little bit about those experiences she's seen. So Nancy, it's your turn to run with it.
Thank you, Paul. First of all, just a huge thanks to Amanda for being a true advocate for the freedom to read. You're very brave, and we need people like you, and we're just so grateful that you're doing all that you're doing. So thank you. As Paul read my comment there, I'm reading in the chat that there are people, staff members, library workers from other libraries who are experiencing similar things, but they're doing it in the capacity of their employment. So to me, that's a really important distinction to make because I believe that employers do have a duty to have specific policies, procedures in place to guide employees in how to handle these types of situations when it comes to security and safety. And I believe also that if they're doing this in the capacity of their employer, generally the employer would have some kind of legal counsel that employees might even be able to consult to help them if there was a situation where maybe a restraining order was going to be enacted or something like that. So that was it. It was just simply that to me, it's a really important distinction. And the comment I saw in the chat, that management just wasn't responsive or wasn't believing the employees. That's really concerning to me as a library director, because again, I believe it is our responsibility to address that. Thank you. That was it.
As somebody who's worked in an HR office in a library, I would agree with Nancy that that's something you want to take to people in your organization and say, I expect and I deserve a harassment-free environment. What are we going to do together? Again, notice the language I'm using there. What are we going to do together? Always keep it a partnership. Don't make it a confrontational thing where you say, what are you going to do because I'm in pain? It's like, what are we going to do because our organization is suffering from this and our community suffers from it? That gives you a lot of strength. Amanda, you want to respond in any way to what Nancy said?
Yeah, I do. I want, yeah, it's a good distinction that I'm speaking out as a resident and it's in the public library. And I am a school librarian. They do bring it. I'm investigated a lot at work because of these outside, because of elected officials actually that call and complain about me and lodge complaints, and they've investigated me a lot. My fight has been in the public library, but it has turned to our schools, and we are seeing censorship in our schools. So that's going to look like a different fight for me because I'm gearing up for that fight within the school system because now it is my job. And so I like to point out to people, the American Library Association has what they call the One Voice ecosystem. And that page, if you go look at it, it's very interesting about how we all support each other, because my hopes is speaking out as a, even though I'm a school librarian or a resident, speaking out so forcefully for the public library when they don't sometimes have that voice, that now that it's going to be a fight in our school libraries, that all of those public librarians who couldn't speak out then because of their employment, they can speak out for the schools, for us. So the school librarians have been fighting on behalf of the public librarians. And so now I'm like, okay, public librarians, now it's your turn. Whereas I would be a little more hesitant to get up in front of the school board because those are my employers. I will, I will expect, I will expect the public librarians who I've helped to come and be a voice for the school librarians. It's all an ecosystem and we've got to help each other. I also expect the academic and the specialist librarians that are in my area to also come out and speak, just like I would go and speak or have spoken in the legislature for laws that impacted them at the academic library level. But yeah, you can only do what you can. You have to be very careful about your job. So had it started in the school system, I would have had to take different precautions in speaking out. But I have not, my school system has protected me. Well, first because I'm not doing anything wrong. But yeah, I've felt protected, and I have taken that stance of like, what are we going to do? How are you going to help us run this school library free of harassment for me and my students? And by phrasing it that way, it has gotten their attention. I'll say that.
As you talk about ALA and what that's done, we've mentioned every library is another resource here. Nicholas has put a comment in the chat about our local city has disallowed city funds being used for institutional memberships at ALA. I was wondering if it's more beneficial to join ALA or our local statewide library organization.
It all depends. I know that professional organizations are costly and that we often have to pay for them ourselves. I pay for my membership to the American Library Association personally, and I pay for my state organizations personally. My institution, my school does not pay for it. I think it's twofold. You want to be in your state organization, obviously, because that's where these are such local fights. And your state can help you better, as far as especially with legislation and local fighting. But we are seeing that. We've seen the Louisiana State Library didn't renew our ALA membership. Alabama has disavowed. I think Arkansas or someone else. They tried that here in Louisiana. We actually had a bill last year in the legislature that was filed. It was called HB 777. It was actually filed by my former school board representative, who is now my state representative for my area, who had been a very good friend of mine. But then she filed this bill, whereas any librarian in Louisiana, had it passed, any librarian in Louisiana who attended an American Library Association conference could face up to 2 years hard labor in prison. And I laugh because it's so comical, but it was a real bill and we had to go fight it. And it's just so absurd. So I'm seeing all of these things happen all across the United States where people are disavowing ALA. And I'll say this, full disclosure, I am the Louisiana chapter counselor to the American Library Association. I am on council. I am on the Intellectual Freedom Committee. And I am director at large for the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable. But a lot of people have said, what is ALA doing? ALA is doing a lot behind the scenes. It's just not as obvious to everyone. You should definitely try to keep your membership into ALA because they are doing work behind the scenes. They are doing a lot of work to help state organizations. And there are so many things that, but you can't just be a member. You have to join and you have to volunteer to get all of it, the most out of it. And you have to join the Connect space and you have to, there's a law for librarians training that you can take to help combat things, all sorts of cohorts. And so you do want to make sure if everybody left ALA, who's going to help fund ALA? And they're not going to have be able to pay their staff that are helping us behind the scenes, even if we can't always see it.
You know, a slightly different twist on what Amanda's been saying about the membership dues. I'm the same way as Amanda in terms of saying there are 2 or 3 professional organizations, including American Library Association, California Library Association, where I gladly pay dues out of my own pocket because I get so much more back from them, and the levels of engagement help me to be better at what I'm doing. We all need to be asking ourselves, as Amanda just did, without ALA, without CLA, without some of the other groups that I'm part of, who would we have? And that's the thing that is at the heart of what we're talking about today. You survive and thrive in these environments because you are not alone. And Amanda's absolutely right. Paying the dues is the first part. That's just the introductory step. It's a level of engagement, being on committees, putting in whatever time you can that's comfortable for you, but meaningful for you to connect to other people and be part of those movements that fight so much of what we need to be fighting right now. So as an advocate, I advocate for deeper involvement in advocacy and ask yourself, can I afford it? And if the answer is no, say, well, what can I do to try to get around that, to get the money to be part of that? I'm supporting them with my time and my money, and that's important. That's what makes us successful advocates.
And I'll say before this, all of this really blew up for me in 2022, but all the way back in 2018, I made a conscious effort I was a member of the American Association of School Librarians because I'm a school librarian. In 2018, I made a conscious effort to start joining committees and volunteering for things. And I built up this huge network of school librarians all across the United States from being on these committees and talking with all of these people and going to my conferences and interacting. So when it did hit the fan for me, there were strength in numbers. People came out of the woodwork to help me because they knew me from all these committees and things that I had been on. And they're like, she has helped with all these committees and we need to help her with this. I don't know that I'd be here speaking to you right now. I might have dropped the whole thing had I not had the forethought in 2018 to join my professional organization and volunteer and amass a network, a professional learning network, to the point where my professional learning network, a lot of them I call family now. So we are very close in the school librarian world. And so I always tell people, join your state and national organizations and volunteer.
And speak out on behalf of them too. Nancy's got her hand up. Go ahead, Nancy.
I do. Here I am again.
Good.
I guess about a year and a half ago, had a conversation with a county supervisor here in California from a very conservative county. And the county was trying to enact a citizens panel to review books. So we had a very interesting conversation. And what stood out the most to me in my conversation with him was it was very clear that what was really bugging him was that he didn't feel that his point of view was being heard by the library profession. He said to me, those librarians, they always think they're right. And he was very, very adamant about that. I'm wondering, my question for you, Amanda, is as a profession, librarians in general, do you think there's anything, if anything at all, that we could do to make people with, especially elected officials, with those points of view to feel better heard, let them know we're listening, but that we're also carrying out our work?
I think it's very important to have one-on-one conversations with your elected officials. And I think that needs to happen before controversy abounds, like you need to establish those relationships. Because for instance, in my case, I tried to establish them after the fact. In hindsight, I wish I had before, and now they don't want to talk to me. So they don't want to talk to me. But I have had other people in our alliance have reached out. Um, you need people, you build these coalitions within your area. You build, you find your library lovers, the people who are willing to speak and do phone calls and emails. You find those people and you divide and conquer, and you go ahead and you talk to your school boards, your library boards of control, your council, your governor, your state department of education, like everybody from the very smallest local city council all the way up to the top. You need to start establishing relationships now. And you just say, hi, I'm a librarian, and can we have a meeting? And you just simple conversations. Any of the conversations that I have had with people, I did have one with an elected official, and I explained the collection. They don't understand collection development policy. They don't understand reconsider. They just don't know because they didn't go to library school, or they didn't, so if you can explain to them, this is why I'm saying this, and this is why I'm saying that, and you come at it with, you advocate with empathy, and you say, this is why I feel this way, and you talk about, historically marginalized groups and stories and book banning and that, but you also go at it from a First Amendment and a taxpayer standpoint, and you say, you represent everyone, not just certain groups, and everyone deserves to see themselves in the stories, and everyone pays taxes. And let me tell you about collection development and why we don't have porn in the library, and how the library is cataloged and categorized, and you have those conversations early on, you will have such less headache down the road. Now we're playing defense and they don't want to listen to me, so I'm having to have people in our alliance that are not librarians explain it. And sometimes you can break through. A lot of times though, these elected officials are not, they already know. A lot of times they already know, and they're just using the library as a stepping stone to win political points. And so you have to also go at it with the understanding that you're not going to change their minds. Some people's minds are not going to be changed, and you just have to accept that. I mean, I don't like that answer, but that's the truth.
Well, if we're talking about dealing with harassment and controversy, Amanda's absolutely right that you don't wait until the moment when it hits to start working on it. You develop that up front. I just put into the chat a reminder that on our YouTube channel, the California Library Association YouTube channel, there's a playlist for the 37 sessions we've had so far in the Ursula Meyer series. And I know we've done at least 3 day in the district things. There's 90-minute workshops talking about how you can reach out to legislators and create long-term relationships that are positive. Get people to come to your libraries. Let them see what you're doing. Use that as a positive way to build a story that the negative stuff that's being fed out there is, as Amanda said, lies. It's controversy to get votes for people and to take people down another path other than the fact-based path that Amanda and so many others are pursuing.
I just want to add, I always invite them into your libraries. So in 2021, I was named SLJ Librarian, School Library Journal Librarian of the Year. So I took that as an opportunity to advocate for school libraries, and I invited all of my local elected officials in. I invited our state superintendent of schools, our superintendents, all of our local elected officials all came in. And they toured the library, and I showed them, this is what a library program looks like, this is what we do, and all that. Now, a year later, half of those people that came are the ones that targeted me. So like you can see, it didn't really make a difference with them, but there were some people that did come that have been allies, that are some elected officials that are no longer elected officials, but have been in the background working to help our library because they remember talking to me about libraries. So, I mean, every little bit helps.
Keep this action oriented, Amanda. Let's go through chapter 15 of your book. For those of you that appreciate the quick summary we're going to do, it starts on page 234 of the book, and it is like a how-to dealing with what we're talking about today. So, Amanda, let me turn it over to you. Feel free to just page through there and offer your best tips to people on some of the things you've encountered and how you've turned them to your advantage in terms of what you're doing on behalf of your community.
So, I probably should have reviewed chapter 15 again.
I can prompt you on this. The first thing is you're talking about attending school board meetings and local government
Yeah.
meetings. So let's talk about the relationships with those people first.
Yeah, you want to make sure that because I come at this from a lot of different angles because not only am I a school librarian and a resident, I'm also a parent. So I come at it as a parent of I'm a parent of a child in our school system. And so I came at it from that point of view and background as well. You want to make sure because a lot of people say, "Oh, we don't have those book banners in our area." And I would like to say yet. So you need to be paying attention first and foremost. Almost everywhere across the country, school board meetings, they have to post their agendas, usually within 24 to 48 hours. You want to always make sure you're reviewing agendas of school board meetings and library board of control meetings. And you also want to make sure that you're reviewing legislation. I apologize. But you want to make sure that you are looking at those agendas. And if there is something iffy, you want to make sure you're watching those meetings. Almost every single library board of control meeting, city council, they all stream them. Watch those. Watch them and see what's happening. You want to make sure you're staying informed. You want to make sure you are, if it does come into play and you're building up your coalitions, you're building up a team of library lovers, you're building up a campaign to support the library. Anytime there are mistruths, people are posting or saying things out of context, you're writing that down. Who is saying it? So, for instance, we had a local pastor who read a page out of context at a library board of control meeting. So we went and looked him up. Who is he tied to? You can look up and see who he donates to. You can see who donates to his church. You can look and see, get to know the players in the game. I have documents on documents. I have documents of all the players in our area, who they're linked to politically, the churches they attend, where they've given money, all of that. And so you can bring these up in conversations. So you want to stay informed, know the players, the games, the meetings when they're happening. You also want to make sure that, like every library has a legislation watch. So you can go to every library's website and you can look at legislation. You can see adverse legislation across the states. And when I did that, I saw that a lot of our Louisiana legislation was the same legislation happening in Arkansas, Alabama, Texas, Florida. And then what you do with that is you look and see what laws have passed and what haven't in the other states. I saw that there was a law in Georgia where it said that a parent had to live in the district to make a complaint. And I was like, how did y'all get that in the works? I also saw that they had defeated a criminalization bill against, so I contacted the Georgia Library Association and I met with them. So look at other states and other areas and what they're fighting and ask them for talking points and tips. ALA also has, on their websites, they have legislation watches. They also address adverse legislation and will give you talking points. If you're a school librarian, the Texas Freedom Fighters has a website with scripts on what to say to parents and legislators. You need to look at, this is very important. You need to go and look at, the American Library Association has First Amendment cases. So you need to know what cases have passed and what is in current legislation. You also need to, I highly, highly recommend following Kelly Jensen on social media. Kelly Jensen writes for Book Riot, and she puts a weekly roundup of censorship every week. Go and read all of those stories, because even if it's not happening in your area, you can see patterns, you can see what works, what doesn't work. So when it does come to you, you're prepared and you're ready. It's very important to follow Kelly Jensen online and stay informed. You also want to make sure you're building up that network right now. You're reaching out to you're making those connections and those relationships. Pay attention, and you want to make sure you're voting. We saw what happened in Florida and Texas when where they got a jump on the book bans. They also got to jump on board takeovers in school boards and public library boards. Moms for Liberty types have taken over all these boards. And so now they're paying attention and they're running campaigns, and they're starting, the good guys are starting to take the boards back, but they're playing catch up. They're playing defense, and you have to play offense.
You want to talk a little bit about how you handle your day-to-day social media work?
I need to work on that.
Yeah, actually, I can't turn on social media without seeing something from you, and it's a nice way to start the day. How do you approach that? How much time do you put into it, and how do you decide what to post?
So social media is a double-edged sword because it's what they've used to harass me, but I have turned it around and I've made sure that I have blocks and controls and things. But the best revenge is success. And so I post all of the good things that are happening to me because I want to show that these people have not dampened my spirit. But I think it's very important to keep people informed. And so I try to repost and retweet and make sure I am providing, if I see a good article by Kelly Jensen or something by Every Library or PEN America or ALA, I want to make sure I'm passing that forward so other people will see it. I try not, but I do that. I've carved out several times during the day. It's summertime for me now, but during the school year when I was school librarian, I would wake up 30 minutes early to review the news and see if there was anything I needed to push out before work. And then after school, I would do the same thing. Like, is there anything I need to talk about or push out? And I get online and I do it and I try to get off. And so, because otherwise you're going to doom scroll and you're just going to be sad. So I get online, I post what I need to post. I encourage people who need encouragement. I rail against something that needs to be railed against. And I try not to spend more than 20, 30 minutes and then I get off of it. But that's what they use, so I'm going to use it right back.
You talk a little bit about the alliances that you help form. Can you describe more how you got the Livingston Parish Library Alliance going and what that's done for you?
Yes, so very early on, John Kraska from Every Library, bless his soul, I just love him so much. So I contacted him through a mutual friend, and John and Peter and Patrick and all of the workers at Every Library, they will do this for anyone. They will help you set up an alliance. And alliances can look different. They can help you set up a pack. They can help you set up an alliance. They can tell you tips on what to do. So they gave us tips on an alliance and what we needed to do to counteract the negativity against our library. And we followed what they said to a T. And largely it was on social media. We've been a little quiet. Well, we kind of raised some eyeballs this week on our social media, but it's been a bit quiet the past few months here. But John helped us set out an alliance, and for the longest time it was me and two other people for like a solid year. But people in our community thought that it was dozens of us. And so, but now it is dozens of us. Now it's hundreds of us. And it's just a way to disseminate information and make sure that you can gather all the library supporters. And we have actual physical meetings, and we strategize who's going to talk and say what at different meetings and help the library in which different ways. But also, that's just in my community. We saw that the same extremist group was also targeting two other nearby communities, two other parishes. So I reached out, or they actually reached out to me, Lafayette Parish and St. Tammany Parish, and we got together, and Lynette Mejia, who is from Lafayette Parish, had the idea to start a statewide organization. So she asked me to participate and help. So I'm a founding member of Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship, because we saw that not only do we need to fight locally, but we started seeing legislation pop up. So the leaders of the three parish alliances are on the executive board of Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship. And we use that organization to help other parishes create their own alliances. So now we are in turn doing what Every Library did for us at the local level. We also have been combating state legislation. And last year we had 9 anti-library bills in Louisiana, and we defeated 7.5. They got a little amendment in at the end, but we defeated 7.5 by coming together, and we sent 44,000 emails to the legislature from our coalition building from our Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship. So we are also doing, we had an organization here called 10,000 Women of Louisiana that trained us on how to go and speak at the legislature. So now we in turn help other library supporters do that. So whatever we've learned, we try to turn around and give it back. So those are the two main organizations in Louisiana that I'm a part of to help combat all of this. And it's just about gathering information, building coalitions, and using those tools to fight back. And you have to, I want to say this though. You cannot fight back. You can't fight fire with fire. Like you cannot be as vitriolic and as hateful as them. Um, Sometimes they are their own worst enemies. So sometimes sitting back is key and you just let them look like crazy fools. So, and that is its own tactical strategy. And that has helped us a lot as well.
Thanks. You still have the book in front of you?
I do, yes.
Pages 244 to 245. You've got a series of tips there that I think are so fabulous. What I'd love you to do is just read the bold-faced items out to people, kind of as a wrap-up of what we're talking about, in terms of what to think about to protect yourself and to keep yourself in a positive frame of mind.
All right. So you want to remove any references to your job from personal and professional websites and social media. I mean, everything. I had a professional website, I had a personal website, and I was using my school email and all that because I just had never crossed my mind that people were going to harass me and target me. So I have gone even on Amazon wish lists and on Goodreads, and you take your work email and your profession, and even on LinkedIn, it does not say where I work. I just say I'm a school librarian and I work in a school system in Louisiana. You want to take all references of your work off of social media. Work emails are for work. Personal emails are for personal use. Don't confuse the two. Even you even want to that goes with computers too. You don't want to use personal. You want to use your personal computers for personal things and work computers for work. You can retroactively set all previous Facebook posts to private or friends only viewing with the click of the button. And I suggest everybody in this call go and do that today. One click, and you set every post on Facebook to private. And I only show what I want to show. Change your passwords often on all accounts. Set up, and this isn't in there, but you want to set up the there's like a 2-click authenticity. You want to make sure you do all of that. People try to hack my emails and my social media all the time. So I go in every few weeks and switch up passwords and do that. And yeah, it's a pain because, you have things saved on your computer and all of that. But no, go, just trust me. You want to there's an app called Slack. And I talk about this a lot, and they'll say, she's using it to circumvent and hide things from parents. No, I'm not. I just know that in this day and age of being hacked, I don't want people getting a hold of our plans of resistance. And so we use Slack to communicate. We sometimes, I'm sorry, Slack for group. So we use Signal to communicate because Signal, and again, Signal was made popular when Hedgepeth, when he was we were texting war plans. I mean, it
Yeah,
is
man, you're not
incredibly
starting to war plans in Signal, right? We're not going down that road.
we use Signal a lot to set up our plans, and I'm sure there are people that can hack it and read into it, but we just use that extra level of protection. We set it up to disappear so that things disappear within 8 hours, so all of our texts and things cannot be pulled back up. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Don't engage with the online trolls. You can also report harassment or misinformation on most social media platforms. If you receive a threatening email, do not forward it as you can potentially mess the email's code. Document every link, screenshot, and email, and I cannot reiterate that enough. Document, document, document. If someone posts something about you personally, go use the Wayback Machine. That still works. You want to make sure you post URLs. I always save all the URLs, and I have a document where I will have a screenshot, the original link, and the saved URL from the Wayback Machine. My attorney is like, oh, I need more. She says she needs more librarians as clients because I just hand her everything on a silver platter. But you want to curate all that information. And if you're being attacked personally, you want to go in immediately with your doctor and document your weight, your blood pressure, all of these things. Get a blood panel done because I did that, and I can show how much my health has deteriorated and how much this has taken a toll on my body physically. And I've also documented all of my therapy appointments and things to show this has caused me to go into therapy and have to take anti-anxiety medication, which all will come up in court if I ever get a trial.
Thank you. Your final chapter has a wonderful title, Don't Let Anyone Dull Your Sparkle. Talk about that, please.
I had a student, and I talk about my student, Alana. Um, I used to tell that to her when I taught her seventh and eighth grade. I taught her 2 years in a row. And I used to don't let anybody dull her sparkle. And her family actually bought me a sign, and it's in the library still to this day. And Elena's like 24, 25 now. Uh, and it says, Don't let anybody dull your sparkle. And to me, that goes hand in hand with a poem that a friend had sent me early on, Invictus by William Ernest Henley. I don't know, but it's Invictus, and it's, no matter how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll, I am the master of my fate, the captain of my soul. And so I am in charge of what I let in and what I let out. And I refuse to let the negativity in. And it's hard when you're bombarded with it from all sides. And some days are worse than others. But I choose how I will respond to that. And I will always respond publicly with love and kindness and empathy. Privately is a different matter, and you can go with your friends and you can cuss a storm and you can say, I hate these people and blah, blah, blah. But openly, the kids are watching, students are watching. And I am in charge at the end of the day of 709, 10, and 11-year-olds every single day. And even though my fight is in the public sector, my students are watching. And these people that are trying to destroy libraries are doing it in the name of protecting the children. But the way they are going about it is horrific and the most horrible example to set for children. And so I will always respond in a way that my students can look up to me and say, well, maybe she lost in court, but she did it with integrity. So I'm doing my best.
Amanda and I had a chance just before we started today for me to say, what things do you normally not get asked? She said, look, I've done so many interviews, I've been asked everything. Then we started to chat about it, and she says, people very rarely ask a couple of questions that are integral to what she's doing. Like, is this really necessary? Was it necessary for people to do this level of attack against a librarian who simply went to a public meeting? So, Amanda, was this necessary?
No, it's not necessary. These people are making up all of these things. These people that say that there's porn in the library, there's porn. First of all, no libraries, nobody's buying porn for the library. There are unaccompanied minor policies in libraries, there are collection development policies. All of this is unnecessary. And what we're seeing is that politicians have created, and this is, like I said, 72% of these, the ALA has reported it. 72% of this is done by political action groups or government entities. They're trying to get your vote. They're ultimately trying to devalue our profession. They're trying to devalue education and libraries so that they can privatize them and defund them. A dumber society is an easier-led society. All of this was unnecessary. They targeted us for a reason. They targeted the stories for a reason. It's a target. It's an attack on the LGBTQ plus community, particularly the trans community right now, and they're using libraries to do it. It's an attack on people of color and history, real history. And all of it's unnecessary. These are all made up. It's made up controversy because they don't want to take care of real actual problems. And so, no, none of this was necessary. This is all done by politicians. And I wish people would realize that and go look at your politicians. And if they're pushing it, that's not a politician that wants to do something really beneficial for your community. That's just a politician that's using politics to get ahead.
We heard Amanda talk about having to actually document things physically so that if it goes to court, she can talk about that, which raises the question that she said nobody actually asked with this particular wording. Is it worth it, Amanda?
Yes. So yes, it is worth it. To me, it's worth it. Uh, I I wouldn't have gone and done anything differently. Number one, because I didn't do anything wrong. I went and gave a very general speech to protect my library from bad actors. And I would do that every single day. I would still do it. Even after they have attacked me, even though right now I cannot go grocery shopping in my own community because I get approached and followed around and videotaped and told that God's going to put a millstone around my neck and drown me in the pits of hell just for going to get some milk at the store. So, but to me, it is worth it. I've lost a lot of students. I've taught for 24 years. Like over 8,000 students. I added it up one day, over 8,000 students. And dozens have taken their own lives. Not while I taught them, but as they got older and they grew up. And when you look at the groups that these students that have grown up and taken their own lives, they generally fall into two categories. One, there's a lot of them that are veterans that went and served overseas and came back and were not given the tools to come back into our country and society, and they took their own lives. So I raise money and I do work in that area. And the other group is students that are members of the LGBTQ community in our community, and they did not feel loved and supported, and they felt ostracized, and they took their own lives. And I will not be a part of that. I want every child in my school to feel safe and loved, and I want every patron in our public library to feel that they can walk into our public library and their families are represented on our shelves, and people to know that accurate history is represented on our shelves. To me, that is very important. And I grew up Southern Baptist Republican in my small town, Louisiana. And it was drilled that this land is your land. This land was made for you and me. And the Constitution is key, and love thy neighbor. And that is what I'm doing. I'm doing what I was raised to do. It's not my fault that everybody else in my community are not practicing what they preached.
Thank you. Heady words, encouraging words. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of the umpteen millions of people asking for interviews for you to say yes to CLA and to our audience too. This is where I turn it back to people who have sat with us through this and interacted with Amanda. I want to make sure that this has a meaningful impact on you, so I'll leave you with a challenge. Please let us know in the chat or by unmuting yourself, what's one thing you'll do differently in the next week because you were part of this conversation? And if you're watching the archive version, you can jot your answer down and send it to me and Amanda later. One thing you'll do differently, anybody?
I'm going to lock down my socials.
Good. You'll have a much happier life that way. On the thing of locking down your socials and actually facing some of the harassment that Amanda talks about and others have, I've heard some of the best activists across the country and advocates across the country say, when it really gets heavy, they hand over some of their accounts to friends that they trust. The friends will go through and delete the hate stuff before they get there. So if any of you actually face that level of harassment, think about somebody you trust who can actually clean up your incoming stuff for you so that when you go onto your accounts, you can use them for the positive things you want to do. Nicholas is adding to not feel impelled to fight fire with fire and rely on our community to fight this battle. Again, we've talked so much about John Kraska in every library. John tells a wonderful story of a library director who was working in a conservative community and was getting complaints. And when he did book displays, all the books on display seemed to tilt in a liberal direction. And the director was so frustrated. He explained to John, I put out books in all perspectives, but of course the books with a conservative perspective get checked out. So all that's left in the display is the liberal side. And John said, why don't you explain that to the community? And he did, and it calmed things down. Sometimes the best thing is just be honest, be transparent, or have somebody say that for you. I see Hannah saying in the chat, one thing she'll do is, the chat's moving so fast here, it's jumping past there, but I think she's talking about, yes, following Kelly Jensen, find out if we have a collection development policy. Aaron says, but also make sure you have empowered your community to fight on your behalf. Absolutely. It's all about us building those coalitions. And again, I mean, it sounds like a commercial, but it makes sense. California Library Association for you here in California, that's you. If you're a member, we are all stronger together and we can accomplish things. If you sit back and say, not for me, I can't afford it, doesn't do anything for me, we're not as strong. And then you're left out where Amanda was not left. Alma says, I want to proactively learn about what other libraries in our community are experiencing. Not sure I'm going to find this info, but want to learn more. Talk to a librarian, they'll help you find it. Actually, you can go online and look. If you're here in California, look at the CLA website and contact some of us in California Library Association. We'll direct you in the right direction. So Carol Frost was on here earlier. She's very active on the advocacy side, and all of us that are active on that committee and here in the Ursula Meyer Library Advocacy Training Program, we love doing that. We thrive on it. Reach out to us and we'll make you part of what we do. Frankly, we need you. Amanda, any last words you want to say?
I will say I am headed to Kenya at the end of the summer, and I am so looking forward to shutting off though for a solid month. I just sometimes when you do this work, you do need to rest. So I want to reiterate to everybody, take time for yourself. Take time for yourself, or you'll run yourself ragged. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. It is that there's that cliche where you have to put on the airplane mask first before you can help other people, and it's so true. So make sure you're taking care of yourself, however that looks for you.
So I'm hearing loudly and clearly, I shouldn't ask you for any more interviews in the next week or two. A pitch for upcoming events. We don't have anything on the events page yet, but I'm happy to say we've confirmed our next 3 events. They're generally on the second Wednesday of the month, but I will occasionally, as I did with Amanda, switch out dates to accommodate a presenter that I really want to have in that's not available. Rough thing to watch for on the events page within the next week or two. Wednesday, July 9th, which will be the second Wednesday. Tim McDonald, director of the Pasadena Department of Libraries and Information Services, is going to come and talk to us about 2 major library ballot initiatives that he helped get. So that'll be about advocating through referenda. Wednesday, August 13th, again, the second Wednesday of the month, we have a wonderful lineup of California library directors. Genesis Hansen, Michael Lambert, Peter Coyle, and Patty Wong. Topic's going to be library directors talking about advocating from a position of leadership. Oh, I see Amanda clapping. Come back, Amanda. We want you in that audience. They're all wonderful presenters. They're all very active in library land for obvious reasons. I'm just so happy that they said yes. And then we're going to switch out dates in September. It'll be the 3rd Wednesday. We're going to do library advocacy, preparing 2-minute presentations for public meetings. And I'm happy to say our main presenter there is Hillary Thayer, who is a library director in Monterey County Free Library. She is the chair of the Ursula Meyer Endowment Committee, and I'm just delighted to have her in. We're going to get a legislator to come in. So it'll be kind of a 2-perspective thing of how do you, in 2 or 3 minutes at a public meeting, get your message across? And we'll have an actual legislator there to talk about what he or she looks for in those kind of presentations. So that's what's coming up. Don't forget the archive version. Don't forget we love you and we want you to come back. Spread the word. We're here for you. With that, thanks. We'll see you in a month. Those of you that want to hang for a few more minutes after the recording stops, hang. And Karen, we can cut the recording now.